Some time ago in a video called Making Choices, I showed you how to make a nice cup of tea. I got quite a lot of comments about that and how to clean my tea mug, which you may remember was stained rather badly with tannin from the tea. Today I want to look at the lowly tea or coffee break and how important it can be. My name's Ian Currey and this is Thinking Out Loud. Come on, let me tell you what I think. By now, most of you know that for a few years I've been working on board aircraft as part of the crew. Now, working for one of the world's biggest airlines means that there are many thousands of people that work there. Of course, we don't all work in the same place, and we certainly don't all have the same jobs. But even just in the crew base here in Atlanta, there are many thousands of people. Before I fly, I take a look to see who's on the crew, to see if I recognize any of the other names. But very often it will be the very first time we've actually worked together, even if we may know each other. On top of that, I usually work up at the front of the aircraft, and so may hardly meet those in the back until we stop for a break or are heading to our layover hotel. Recently, though, I did recognize a couple of the names and look forward to spending some time catching up with friends on our 3-day rotation. After the first flight of the day, we had time to sit for about an hour, and one of the crew went off to buy some coffee. I found a corner to sit in with one of the others, and we chatted away about this and that before eventually realizing that Andy hadn't come back. We thought we'd better go off and look for him, and found him almost at the front of a very long line of a very well-known coffee shop. "Hey Andy, grab a couple of extra coffees, will you?" we joked. Well, Andy's very generous, and he came back with one of those cardboard things with coffee for us all. But it struck me, Andy had really not had much of a break at all. He'd stood in line waiting to get coffee for almost all the time we had, and certainly had missed out all the catch-up natter time. Oh, don't worry about Andy. We all had dinner together that evening, so we were able to spend time with him and get him caught up too. Being part of a team or part of a crew does rely on us getting to know and understand each other. And aircraft crew really do know and trust each other, even if they've never met. Now, you might wonder how that is possible. But we've all been through rigorous training, and so we can trust each other to do exactly the same thing in a given situation as any other crew member would. Sometimes it just takes a look or a hand signal, and we just know. But it's still lovely to get to know who you're actually working with, isn't it? In Holland, there is a thing called a stroopwafel. It's lovely, and you have to put it over your hot coffee mug until it gets all soft and is about to fall in before it tastes the best. A good friend of mine called Vim showed me that trick years ago. And we would sit in his kitchen or in the summer under a tree somewhere, and we'd chat away for a long time, sipping on the coffee and munching through stroopwafels. Lovely. In Sweden, I learned from my friend Bertil that this is called Fika. Now, Fika isn't at all like the coffee break we were having at the airport, where someone had to wait half an hour in a Starbucks line, or even like the traditional English tea break. No, not at all. Tea breaks or coffee breaks vary a lot around the world, but in England, they tend to be sit and sip. It's just long enough for the tea to get cool enough to drink. Not much more. In America, that's more likely to be a coffee break without actually taking a break. And so long as you don't have to wait in a line somewhere, it's much more of a grab-and-go thing and is often drunk at your desk. When I first started working in America, I really thought it was funny that all the coffee cups had sippy lids, like a kid's sippy cup. But now I totally understand why. In Turkey and much of the Middle East, this process is handled using a big urn of tea or coffee and tiny cups or glasses like these. But Fika is different. I've tried to find a word in English, but there really isn't one. I think perhaps the best I can do is use the old English word fellowship, and that conveys something of the idea at least. The Swedes are extremely good at it too. It's a time where everything slows down. You can't just grab your coffee and start sipping away and nattering to those around. First you have to sit and just wait. I was never sure quite what we were waiting for, but it was, I'm told, for the time to be right. Now, traditionally, if you don't know what to think about, you can spend time thinking about which of the 7 kinds of cookies you're going to try when it's time to do that part of Fika. Fika is a thing that happens a couple of times a day in a typical day, and well after the coffee is poured and long after the cup is empty, someone will break the silence with a question such as, "How's your wife today?" And a few sips will pass before the answer comes, "She's as lovely as ever." Fika is an experience more than a coffee break. Everyone slows down for a few minutes, and in contrast to a British tea break where everyone's milling around chatting and slurping and trying to get through their mug of tea to see if they can grab a second brew before work commences again. No, Fika is a time where you are together, but it's a slow process and no rush is possible, or it just isn't Fika. I often wondered how we actually get to know people. In the English tea break, it would usually be difficult to really get much beyond banter and chatter. But with Fika, the Swedish way, I could well imagine world-changing friendships could be formed. Well, eventually. In British culture, we talk about tea breaks as if they are actually Fika, but they usually aren't like that at all. Paddington Bear might come about as close as is possible outside of Sweden when he would sit with Mr. Gruber and eat a sticky bun. Although knowing Paddington, that isn't long at all. Fika is much more about thinking than speaking. Those sorts of times are important to everyone, aren't they? Paul, when he was writing to the Hebrews, he seemed to think so. And let us not neglect meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now. And I've often had people quote this to me as an admonition when I've not been in church for a while. It's usually because I'm working or sleeping after a long day flying. I think the encourage one another part might have been being missed, don't you? As always, let's look at the verse right before this one, shall we? Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Oh, there you go. As ever, that gives us a rather different Fika kind of feel to things, doesn't it? Motivate, encourage, love, good works. I really like that idea, don't you? Have you had coffee with someone recently? How did you encourage that friend? I have another good friend, his name is Dennis, and although we don't do it very much, not nearly as often as we should, we sometimes meet for what we call sissy coffee. It's not real coffee, it's one of those strange coffee things that you put goop in and sit at the counter and sip long enough to make it cold and just to be together and chat. Certainly not a grab and go. No, not one of those places with the line, but I think we first did it in a supermarket coffee counter while our wives were shopping. Yeah, possibly. This idea of encouraging each other or spending time thinking of ways to motivate one another is so important, isn't it? Especially when our society has changed so much in a busy no time today culture. I love the way Bertil used to sit and think, and if I tried to say something just too soon, he would raise his hand and say, Fika, as if to say, enjoy the moment, think. His words were very few, and they matched Paul's idea to communicate in his letters. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. Do you remember something someone may have said to you a long time ago? Do you think things you say to people now will be remembered in years to come? That let everything part of the verse there is quite a challenge, isn't it? This week I'm going to try and find a place to drink coffee without a long line, just so I can sit and think before I say anything. Let me know how you enjoy a coffee break and what quirks tea time has for you. Until next time, Fika.